Steve Martin suggested that if you're ever caught committing some awful crime and you've got hostages, to make at least one crazy demand so you can plead insanity later. So I want $1 million in a suitcase, I want a flight to Cuba, and I want the letter E stricken from the English alphabet. And the left has apparently reached that point in trying to defend the Walt Disney Company in Florida with one crazy demand. And that is, just to move Disney World. Move it. Just, pick it up and move it to somewhere better run than Florida. And this is where I start to lose it. Puerto Rico. That's where we're going to move Disneyland. Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Green, Bill Little, and Scott Hott.
My favorite part about Puerto Rico is it's a very convenient drive.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, man. We're going to get into all of this real soon. I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott in audio format only today as visiting an undisclosed location. And this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. So, gentlemen, just to give you a brief rundown of how we got to this place where we're going to move Disney World, Puerto Rico.
I don't know. It was big enough for Disney World.
Last year in 2022, in response to, sex grooming in Florida's public schools, the Florida legislature passed and Governor Ron DeSantis signed the, what do they call it? The Parental Rights in Education Act. I'm not even going to refer it by the slur that the left and the media, but I repeat myself, refer to this law by. But the law is very popular. Even a majority of Florida Democrats support this thing. It's about parental rights in school. This is, what America stood for since almost the beginning. So the left hired one of the biggest, wealthiest, most influential, when you consider its cultural impact, companies in the world, the Walt Disney Company, based in California, to take on Ron DeSantis and the Florida legislature, both popularly elected by huge margins in Florida, to wage war against this bill and now this law. And so the Florida legislature took away Disney's special privileges. Now, gentlemen, I don't know how much you know about this, but back in 1967, and Billy, you spent a couple of decades, I think, in Florida,
Yep.
right? Walt Disney got a special carve-out around Orlando. It's called the Reedy Creek.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, Reedy Creek Development
Zone or something. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So just refer to it as Reedy Creek.
Reedy Creek, right.
Yeah. And Reedy Creek basically made Walt Disney its own little magic kingdom in the middle of Florida.
That's right.
Untouched by Florida law. They could set their own regulations. They impose their own taxes. Self-ruling kingdom inside of Florida, totally run by the Disney Company. So the special exemption, believe it or not, was supposed to help create Epcot, which was the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. It wasn't supposed to be a fairground. It was supposed to be an actual experimental city.
Yep.
Disney never delivered on that. And in this war that Disney launched against the Florida government took away Disney's special status. It's no longer Reedy Creek. It's got some dry, boring name. The Florida Tourism Oversight District. Exciting. And so now Disney is subject to the same laws, the same regulations, the same tax code as Universal Studios, as the tiniest little theme park there. Everybody's playing on the same level playing field now. This is what has the left so up in arms that a couple of New York Times columnists, we're not talking about, just Keith Olbermann, who's also in on this, by the way, saying Disney should move away from Florida and reopen Disney World in somewhere nicer like Puerto Rico. Bill, you just want to point and laugh, but they're serious, aren't they?
First thing, because I hadn't heard the story until just before we started rolling, the first thought I had was a Stephen Wright joke, which is, they say it's a small world, but I wouldn't want to paint it.
Yes. Worst ride ever, by the way. Yes.
So my dad was a hotel manager, and because of that, I got a chance to go to Disney World probably 2-3 months before it opened.
Wow.
Open to the public, right? And it wasn't just us. I mean, obviously, this entire group of people who were kind of like the dress rehearsal for the place. And being the sci-fi nerd I was, that we stayed at the Contemporary Hotel, which is this kind of hollow building. It's got these slab sides, and the monorails go right through the lobby. And to me, that's the epitome of the future. And I was as happy a camper as I could have been. But moving just that hotel would be a lot of work. I mean, it'd take probably 200 guys easily, to lift that thing, and carry it, walk it down the length of the Florida Turnpike, put it on a barge in Key West, and then tow it, because you'd need a couple of Boston whalers at least to do that, I would think. And that's just the one hotel, Steve. That's not the rest of the stuff. This is the kind of thing where you really just have to kind of discipline yourself to say, surely we're being trolled. And then you look back on your life experience of the last several years and realize, no, we're not being trolled. These idiots actually believe this. So let's just say, for the sake of the argument, right? Just for the sake of the argument, that by losing these special protections that they've had since the beginning, let's say it costs them $100 million a year, right? How many years of $100 million a year would you have to pay before you got into the cost of moving Disney World? I mean, honestly, it's just crazy. And by the way, it's completely unrelated, but it's just triggered this thought about fines and penalties. There's a restaurant out here that we like very much, and we went there for our birthdays, Natasha and I, and they serve martinis with dry ice in it, which really is kind of cool, bubbly effect, keeps it cold, doesn't water it down, right? And they used to just bring these things out, and I loved them. And then suddenly they didn't, and at the restaurant in Beverly Hills, and they said, where's my dry ice? Why does this look like just a regular martini? And they said, well, because somebody swallowed the dry ice, and so now we can't do this anymore. Right? I said, oh, great. We're lowering our standards to that of the biggest idiot. Anyway, we went out for our birthdays a couple weeks ago, and the dry ice was back. Oh. I said, the dry ice is back. Isn't that great? That's cool. I guess we decided maybe I shouldn't swallow the dry ice. And by the way, what are you going to do protecting me from eating my own fork? But anyway, here's the thing that really impressed me. So they removed the legal restriction. Said, oh no, they didn't remove the restriction. No, every time that government people come down here and see us serving this stuff with dry ice, we get fined. The manager just said, pay the fine. And I thought, really? Yeah, we pay the fine. We're not gonna degrade the experience of this restaurant to because some bureaucrat 400 miles away has decided that they can make some extra money off of this. So pay the fine. Anyway, look, here's the thing about Disney, right? Disney World, Orlando, I was just barely remember when Orlando was essentially a bus transfer point. Orlando became the most popular tourist destination in the world because of Disney buying up huge tracts of essentially worthless swampland in the middle of Florida and turning it into this miracle, because Disney World is a miracle. I went to Disney World probably 12 or 14 times before I moved to California. So I saw Disney World 14 times before I saw Disneyland in Anaheim. And when I saw Disneyland in Anaheim, I said, that's not Cinderella's castle. That's Cinderella's tool shed. That's Cinderella's the castle in Disney World. So it's 7 times that size. So it is a landmark. And the entire purpose of Reedy Creek was as an incentive, right? It's an incentive. It's like, come and develop this land and we'll give you these tax breaks. Okay. Well, that's long before they turned into a media empire that owns everything. ABC News owns Star Trek, owns Star Wars, and owns everything. And they still want this benefit. And the main thing out of this story, Steve, is look at how hysterical the left gets when we fight back. They just
unreasonable, unthinking
lunatic. We're going to move Disney.
Yes.
And by the way, I just out of due respect for our Democratic friends, I have some concerns that if you move something as big as Disney World to Puerto Rico, that there'd be a significant danger that island could capsize, and and that's something that I don't think these guys are factoring this in as quickly as the rest of the science lovers.
Bill, you gave me a great unit of measurement here, I think. So if I had to just kind of ballpark it, Ant-Man 3, after you factor in production costs, marketing costs, and weak ticket sales, is probably going to lose Disney about $200 million. So if you're right that it would cost them $100 million extra a year in taxes and compliance, that's half an Ant-Man 3 every year.
So let's definitely move it.
Yeah, we got we got to get that. But Scott, this actually brings me to the broader point. Disney's problem isn't that Disney World is in the wrong location, or that they've suddenly lost their unprecedented legal status. Their privileges that no other company in the history of this country anywhere has ever had. Their problem is they've taken the Star Wars franchise and they've killed it. They've taken the MCU, and I think they're in the process of killing it.
It's dead.
They're taking their own properties, remaking them as live action remakes that suck, and so they're killing their own intellectual property. And at the same time they're doing all this, they're engaging in a political fight that they cannot win against one of the most popular governors in the country. Isn't that a lot crazier than anything that anybody said on Twitter about moving a theme park?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you've got a creative enterprise, the only way to keep moving forward, so to speak, quoting Meet the Robinsons, is to be creative. And if you start losing that spark and you're just rehashing old stories. I mean, Walt Disney was one of the few people who could take an old story and make it fresh. I mean, when he took Jungle Book and, as the legend goes, he said, we want to make a movie out of Jungle Book. And so his people said, okay, we'll go out and get copies of the book for everybody. And he goes, no. I don't want you to read the book. Here's the story. This is what happens in Jungle Book. There's this boy, there's these animals, they do this and they blah, blah. Okay, now go ahead, do it. and he had a vision for that. And he was able to transform a relatively old story into something fresh and alive. And now to do these remakes and rehashes and, let's take it and turn it into a live action film because it did so well. It becomes a property in more ways than one. It's not just a creative act anymore. Now it is a franchise, and now you've got to build the franchise. And it takes a different kind of person and a different kind of organization to build franchises than it does to create new ideas. And that's what happens to most big companies. They start out as a creative enterprise, and then they say, wow, this is sweet. Let's keep the stock value growing. How can we do what we just did yesterday again today and slightly different and see if we can make more money on it? So that it's just sad to see that happen, but it's kind of inevitable. Now, the difference with Disney is they've been very effective at doing it for a period of time, and it's only been in recent years that they've started to squander this amazing cash machine, this goose that laid the golden egg. And now, to have people thinking that the problem is Florida or the problem is a Republican governor of Florida or something having to do with a tax enterprise zone or something like that is just absurd. I mean, when you first started talking about this, I was like, yeah, let's have the carnies load up the tilt-a-whirl on the 18-wheeler and just drive to the next town.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever?
And when you said it's a self-ruling kingdom, all I could think of was, isn't that what we all want? I want one of those for me and for each of us. I know that these people are just trying to be provocative, and so I don't see any long-term consequences of that. But I do think there's a broader issue when you have tax incentives to lure any kind of area. There are always long-term consequences of that, because if it took a tax incentive to get somebody to move there, it may take a tax incentive to keep them there. In Disney's case, it's a rare situation where I thought it might be justified. As Bill said, it's not getting any better than this. If something that could happen, they fail and sink into the swamp and we don't lose much. But in most tax districts in this country, the governments are constantly saying, hey, if you come here, you don't have to pay any taxes for 10 years. And then 10 years later, the company says, okay, we're ready to move. What will you do to keep us? And I think that's always a mistake in terms of governance.
Can I add one thing? Steve just needs to be there, I think.
Please.
First of all, did Scott sound like a Xylon warrior for you there?
There were a couple of stretches there where we're getting some
little internet distortion. So just needs to be said. I saw Glenn Beck speak once. I introduced him at an event, and he brought a bunch of his historical things. One of the things he brought was the original prospectus for Disneyland by Walt Disney. And he goes to the trouble to point out that in the prospectus for Disneyland, Walt Disney says, this is a place that will represent everything that's good about America. Family, wholesomeness, decency, courtesy, all of that stuff. And it's a criminal. It's almost the same thing as calling the nation's capital after George Washington. It was supposed to be once a big honor. Now it's like they should call the nation's capital, Arnoldville. And Disney's name should not have to go through what they're doing to Disney, because he was an amazing, amazing American.
Only somewhat off topic, I guess. I could see sort of the beginning of the end, just the faintest glimmer of it. After Disney bought Pixar, and a couple of years later, they did their first non-Toy Story sequel, and it was Cars 2. And it was just lame and lazily written and kind of obvious. And Pixar, which used to mean a level of quality up here, they still make good stuff generally, but that level of quality has been coming down.
They had 9 hits in a row, was it? 9 blockbuster hits in a row?
Oh, just massive.
Amazing.
And I'm not saying they've released nothing but crap since Disney bought them, but you've watched that general level slowly
Lots
decline.
of sequels, yep.
And to Star Wars, they killed it off almost instantly. The MCU has been petering out since Endgame. But what really gets me about this, here we have a clear-cut case of and I usually don't say politics are clear-cut. Politics is usually pretty muddy. But here we've got a pretty bright line drawn between one side that's trying to protect kids from groomers and another side that's using the fiscal weight and cultural muscle of the Walt Disney Company to defend these actions. And if there's a bright line here, it's got to be the one where you're on the side of parents being able to defend their own children from predators. I think that's pretty damn clear. And our prospective GOP presidential nominee for 2024, Donald Trump, has come out on the side of Walt Disney. I wish I were making this up, but on Truth Social, which I only read about this because somebody reposted it on Twitter where people actually are, Trump said DeSantis is being absolutely destroyed by Disney. How? He doesn't say. His original PR plan fizzled, so now he's going back with a new one in order to save face. Again, none of this is explained. Disney's next move will be the announcement that no more money will be invested in Florida because of the governor. By the way, Disney's moving 2,000 jobs from California to Florida, Mr. Former President. In fact, they could even announce a slow withdrawal or sale of certain properties. Here's Trump getting on the move, Disney World bandwagon. Or the whole thing, Trump says. Watch. That would be a killer. In the meantime, this is also unnecessary, a political stunt. Ron should work on the squatter mess. I have absolutely no damn clue what Trump is talking about here. All I know is there's a bright line, and he's on the wrong side of it. And that's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. For Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, I'm Steve Green. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.